So as we celebrate International Women's Day, at Spicemoney Chaupal, we'd like to welcome our guest on the show this afternoon. We have with us Shinjini Ji, regulator, a banker, a fintech entrepreneur, and now an author. She's someone I just met, and I tell you what, this is going to be a very fascinating conversation because in her we have someone who is full of experience and wisdom, not just about regulation and banking, but about life and entrepreneurship. We were just talking about many things which I want to unravel during this Chaupal. So I welcome you all to the Spice Money Chaupal. बहुत मजा आने वाला है इस conversation में बहुत चीजें सीखने को मिलेंगी. And आज at International Women's Day, the theme of 2025 is Accelerate Action. And who better to talk about action than Shinjini Ji with all her experience over the years working across the spectrum in financial services. So I'm so honored and happy to welcome her on the Spice Money Chaupal. With that, can I say hello to you, Shinjini Ji?
Hello, and thank you so much for having me here. In fact, many years ago, more than 17 years ago, when I left RBI, I was hoping कि मुझे कोई Shinjini जी फिर नहीं बोलेगा.
क्या करें आदत से मजबूर.
पर अब आपने बोल ही दिया है, तो thank you. And it is, it is a wonderful opportunity to talk about many things that are important to you and that are important to me. So let's just get talking.
Wonderful. So Shinjini Ji, just before we came into the studio, I asked you what's going on in your mind. And you said to me two words. Maybe you can share with our audience, exactly given your journey to date, what makes you who you are today?
One thing for me that I think defines me is that I let go of fear at some point of time. So everything from dealing with career changes, which in my case have been very dramatic. I used to say I never change a job, I always change a career. And from there to the latest thing that I did was to go and spend about 4-5 months in my village with my mother. And that was, again, just cutting myself off from practically everything and really immersing myself in that. Or whether it was leaving Bombay in 23 October and moving to the mountains to live in Mukteshwar, where I live without a television, and people just find that strange. So basically letting go of the fear of what I'm going to do. I think that kind of has defined my journey. And being excited about new things. I mean, I still do feel excited about new things, despite all the, disappointments or all the, sort of setbacks. So I think I was just telling you that I lost my mother in November just now. And it was a very different experience spending those last days with her and just seeing, just very, very meaningful in many different ways. And it helped me to understand the idea of time, the idea of life, the idea of, sort of relationships, the idea of what others do for you, what is the space of things in your life. So yeah, so it's been a little bit philosophical as well.
And you mentioned, and we were talking about, I used the word financial empowerment because you worked on this theme of, independence for women. And you said, empowerment mat kahiye, independence kahiye, right? Can you talk about what does it mean to you when you talk about independence?
Yes, I think there is a need for all of us now to make this into a movement. And I'm so glad that you switched without, challenging me on that. Because kahin na kahin se, even I was a part of RBI for the first 17 years of my life. And we were very bullish on inclusion. And we were also very bullish on what we called women empowerment at that stage. And that's also a terminology that goes back to approximately that time. But if you now go around and look at where we are, I think a lot of women are who are independent because they are just doing it, So empowerment sort of comes with this baggage of somebody making you, giving you power. It's like, वो चांद को सूरज की रोशनी मिलती है वाली बात. But actually ऐसा नहीं है. The women that I met, I have just traveled through 35 of India's tier 2 cities, and I have met all types of women. Women who operate lifts to women who manufacture, run large manufacturing companies. And what I have realized is that the women who are independent navigate the world of everything. It's not that nobody's life is free of challenges. So they do need power. Power is an important concept. You need power to break through many barriers, internal or external or social or financial. And they do need that power, and they use that power. But essentially, the reason I like the terminology of independence over empowerment is because eventually that's the goal. The goal is that she may be living with everybody else, but if she's independent, then her relationship with everything is different from when she is empowered, because then the strings are somewhere. And I don't like that.
And as you've traveled through these 35 tier 2 cities, what are you seeing as holding back her independence? What is holding it back? What are the barriers? What are the friction points?
See, many times it's themselves. Okay. And I know that there is a very strong, and I am a very studied feminist. I'm not one of those people who says, oh, I'm not a feminist, but I don't like that. I am actually a very well-studied feminist, but I also believe that there is only a degree to which you can take the idea of patriarchy influencing your life and making you in a certain way. There is a place where you need to start taking ownership of your life and your steps and your actions. And I think many women just end up fearful of crossing that Lakshman Rekha to independence. Because if you want independence, then you can't also want the security of the Lakshman Rekha.
So do you think it's about confidence?
I think it's fear.
It's fear.
I think it's fear. Now, we could argue about how much of that fear is drilled from society, because as a girl, if you go out and somebody catcalls you, then आपके घर आएंगे तो आपके पापा बोलेंगे कि कल से तुम बाहर नहीं जा सकते हो, घर में टीचर बुला देते हैं. Versus if a boy goes out and somebody molests him, because that happens a lot as well, I think the response system is different, is very different. The response system is not to lock the boy. I mean, more and more middle-class people do that. But the response system is, of course, very different for girls and boys. So girls just grow up with this idea that there is a safe space for them.
Yes.
And the spaces that are not safe are better avoided. So this avoidance becomes a part of your...
And that is what they start fearing, because they avoid it, and therefore it's fear of the unknown, because they've not experienced it.
Absolutely.
So they fear getting back into it.
Yes. And the trade-off is that you're letting go of your independence, but then it's easier for girls than for boys. Because when the girls let go of their independence, they find a shoulder to lean upon. They find that security of being in the home and taking care of things and making a decent life still, because there is work at home. There is work to be done in that space as well. So they opt for it. And that's not wrong in itself at all. But to find your independence within that also is equally important. So some are able to do that, and some just think it's much easier to cop out and to, let others run my life because it's so much easier.
Yeah.
So I, of course, don't subscribe to the idea that it is external, especially in societies like ours. We do brainwash people, but we also create many, if you start seeing the stories of women, and you work in the space of especially rural women, and actually the very inspiring stories come from that ecosystem. You find very inspiring stories of women who are not held back by anything. And therefore, the question to ask is that if she's not being held back, why are you being held back?
Yeah. So actually, it's interesting you touch on that, because basically you're saying the women in rural India perhaps could take a lead, because by definition, the men move out of the village, they're going and working. Maybe in the village, it's more the woman, the young, the elderly. And by definition, she has to have that sense of independence because she has to take care of the house and all of those things. So, are there things that can be done to make her more independent? Because, you've been a regulator, you worked in the space of fintech, you've been a banker. When we talk about financial independence, and you look at rural women and you look at women in big cities, is it a common challenge across, or are there different nuances to the challenge?
That's a really good question, okay? And let me try to take a stab at it. I think fundamental difference between rural and urban I would say, is mobility. Just physical space. So what space do you take in each society? In rural India, definitely the space taken by women is the courtyard. And very little of the outside space is organically available to her. Now, you will find stories of women who one fine day sat on a tractor and went and tilled their land, whether out of necessity or whether out of choice. But you will find them by exception and not by rule. So in my village, it really made my heart very glad when I went and saw that a whole bunch of young girls were riding motorcycles, okay? And I said, how did this happen? And it turned out that one of the young men who had a motorcycle, just one fine day decided to teach all his cousins to ride the motorcycle.
Oh, nice.
And so they can all ride the motorcycle. I sat behind them and went around the village, and it was great fun. And because so many of them started doing it, it also got normalized. So nobody was now staring at you because you were riding a motorcycle. And then many of them ended up buying their own mopeds or scooties when they could afford it. So, that mobility, that taking the space outside of your home and taking that space not by standing one step behind your husband, but to be able to speak, that is still a battle for most of rural India. I mean, I'm talking from a small sample, but I've also been to other villages, and I'm sure you've been to many others. And you will agree that that is a challenge. In urban India, on the other hand, that is not a challenge. Because even if you are being beaten at home, the fact is that home is a very small space. And so you do end up being out a lot. The outside space is where you go to fill your water, where you stand and talk to other women, where you end up, building your sort of extended community. And the moment you're outside of home, it has a very different, आपको आसमान दिख रहा है खुला हुआ. आप जब आंगन से आसमान को देखते हो तो वो अलग दिखता है, और जब आप बाहर से देखते हो तो अलग दिखता है. तो वो अपने आप में it shapes your life. And so I think that access to space and access to mobility is a very fundamental difference, which is why one of the things that I am writing the book for and trying to explore is this idea of women being available, being seen, just being there on the street. How many women do you see in a street? How many women do you see in the street at night? How many women do you see in in a restaurant or cafe? And I think all of those things make the idea of attaining independence very, very important. आप अकेले जाके फिल्म देख सकते हो या नहीं? आप अकेले जाके कैफे में कॉफी पी सकते हो या नहीं? All of those questions are very different for these women. In urban India, on the other hand, for most women, that's a solvable problem. It's not going to, many cities now have these free bus passes, for women, or and those are all really great policies because they help put more women in the public space.
And what do you see is the role of finance?
Yeah.
Let's talk about the role of money.
Yeah.
That आपने fear की बात की, आपने कहा fear is holding back them becoming independent. Having money in their bank account, which is accessible to them to do what they want with it. How big is that role to help them overcome this fear and become independent और घर से बाहर निकल के बाहर से आसमान देखे? What's the role of finance in this?
I think it's the biggest vector, very simple. Because if you have money, you are able to make that demand. Otherwise, you don't, you cannot.
अगर किसी से पूछना पड़े,
अगर आपको किसी से पूछना पड़े और उस आदमी के पास ये ताकत है कि वो आपको मना कर सकता है,
तो आप
that's
पूछोगे भी
the
नहीं
beginning of the end of the journey of independence. Yeah, you're right. अव्वल तो आप पूछोगे ही नहीं because
वही डर होगा कि मना कर देंगे.
Exactly. And lots of really rich women go through this.
Yes.
Okay?
Yes.
I met many rich women. And one girl told me that she takes a salary from her family business because she says, I know my aunts who are married into very wealthy families. But if they want to go abroad, or because that's the kind of things on their wish list, they have to ask money from their sisters or somebody because they can't ask. They will get it. When they get it, they get it.
But they still have to ask.
But they still have to ask, and they don't want to ask. So the moment you put that power in somebody's hand, your journey is going to be harder. I'm not saying it's impossible, but it's harder. And therefore, money is very important. And therefore, your ability to navigate that. And therefore, you know, when women say na कि नहीं ये पैसा मुझे समझ में नहीं आता है, yeah, you know what, I'm just like no, I can do anything, but don't talk to me about money. Or, you know, I'm this very creative person, I can do so many nice things, but money is very hard. When you put on that attitude, it is going to defeat you. But it's going to defeat you more than it is going to defeat the men, because you have to remember that for every man who says that, you know, I'm an artist type and I don't understand money, he will have a peer group where there will be 5 of them trading every day.
तो क्या ये स्टीरियोटाइप बन गया है कि a woman saying कि भाई मुझे पैसे से कोई लेना देना नहीं है and a man cannot afford to say it, or this is changing, like women are saying no, money is important, I want to understand it. Is it an issue of their own attitude, not wanting to understand it, or is it something which has become like an acceptable thing ki the woman is there in the house, the man is taking care of the money? I know, Shinjini Ji, you've been a regulator. I know the government has been talking about opening bank accounts, putting money into the bank accounts for women, giving them access to those rights and all. Is there a change beginning to happen where women are becoming sensitized to the fact that understanding money, having control over money is important?
I think it is happening, for sure.
Is it happening both urban and rural?
For sure. Yes, it's happening both urban and rural. Rural India in particular, I'll start from there. Because we don't have too many jobs in this country being created, right? So a lot of the jobs that are being created for men are in cities. So something that you said earlier. So they migrate to where the jobs are. So they their money life is very different in that sense. But the women get left behind, right? And therefore they don't have a choice but to deal with the money. बच्चे की फीस पे करनी है,
Yes.
बिजली है, you know, बच्चे को डॉक्टर के पास लेके जाना है, तो आप अवॉइड नहीं कर सकते हो उस चीज.
So you have to understand.
So you have to understand. You have
कितना
to know
पैसा
कि
यहाँ जाना है, कितना वहाँ जाना है, तो you have to manage the money.
Exactly. अगर मुझे 10,000 रुपए आ रहे हैं महीने में और मेरे बच्चे की फीस भी देनी है, और या मैं दूध बेच के मुझे पैसे आ रहे हैं, हर 10 दिन पे मिलते हैं मुझे पैसे, और लेकिन मुझे पैसे देने पड़ते हैं हर 30 दिन पे या whatever. You don't have a choice and you understand it very intuitively, very organically. So one of the reasons we called our company Salt is because the understanding of money for most people is very intuitive. When you ask them conscious questions, they get very confused. But actually intuitively they all kind of do these. Roughly, most people have decent idea, right? Especially in our culture, because हमें बचपन से सिखाया जाता है कि जितनी लंबी चादर हो उतना लंबा पैर फैलाओ. तो कहीं ना कहीं अपनी चादर का और अपने पैर के लंबाई का ध्यान लोगों को रहता है. बहुत कम लोग होते हैं जो who get into trouble. So they engage, they understand. So in rural India, what is happening is very interesting. One is this whole migration economy and the remittance economy, which you know better than I do. The other is that जो jobs create हो रहे हैं grassroots level पे, वो care economy में हो रहे हैं, क्योंकि सारी गवर्नमेंट्स की एम्फेसिस वहाँ पे है. तो एक तो सेल्फ हेल्प ग्रुप्स में औरतें हैं. So the access to cash in that household is typically of the woman who is a member of 3 self-help groups. So चाहे कि वो आदमी दुकान चला रहा हो, चाहे कि वो आदमी गाय भैंस खरीदने का डिसीजन ले रहा हो, पर पैसा जो है, लिक्विडिटी जो है, वो उस औरत के थ्रू आती है. तो इसलिए उसको she is a party to that. The second thing that's happening is that many of these jobs are going to women, like आंगनवाड़ी workers हैं, आशा workers हैं, teachers हैं. तो disproportionately these jobs are being done by women. So घर में जो asset है, जो घर है, खेत है, गाय है, गाय का तो खैर किसी के नाम पे नहीं खरीदी जाती है, पर गाड़ी है, मोटरसाइकिल, हर रूरल हाउस होल्ड में 2 व्हीलर्स होते हैं, ये सब आदमियों के नाम पे होते हैं. हाँ, औरतों के पास क्या होता है? लिक्विडिटी, महीने का कैश आता है उसके पास. तो आप ये कह रहे थे ना कि आप उस औरत को साइन अप करते हैं एजेंट बनने के लिए, पर आदमी जो है वो भाग भाग के काम कर रहा होता है. दैट्स बिकॉज आदमी के पास मोबिलिटी है. तो मेरे पापा कहते हैं कि सरकार को, बिहार में सरकार को एक चीज समझ में आ गई कि एक नौकरी दो तो 2 आदमी काम करेंगे. तो नौकरी औरत को दे दो और आदमी जो है वो मोटरसाइकिल लेके भागता रहेगा, सरकारी ऑफिस में काम करवाता रहेगा. सो व्हाट एंड्स अप हैपनिंग इज दैट इट बिकम्स अ फैमिली जॉब. तो जॉब मिलती है औरत को, आशा वर्कर या आंगनवाड़ी वर्कर या किसी चीज की, पर जब उसको जरूरत लगती है तो वो अपने बच्चे को दौड़ा देती है कि भाग के उसके यहाँ दवा दे के आ जाओ. जब उसको जरूरत लगती है तो वो अपने हस्बैंड को मोटरसाइकिल से भेज देती है कि यू नो डिस्ट्रिक्ट सेंटर में चले जाओ या मुझे वहाँ पहुँचा दो या ट्रेनिंग पे जाना है. सो इट बिकम्स लाइक अ फैमिली एंटरप्राइज. सो इन रूरल इंडिया आई फाइंड दैट the journey of independence to women is in some ways forced upon her, but and therefore easier. But in some ways it's still very hard because ये सारा काम करते हुए, ये सारा कैश लाते हुए, उसके सर पर से घूंघट नहीं हटना चाहिए. तो ये वाली जो प्रॉब्लम है ना, ये हमारे देश की खास प्रॉब्लम है. सो आप देखेंगे कि ये सब कुछ कर रही हैं मैडम, लेकिन सर पे पल्लू तो होना ही है. और जब घर में कोई बीमार हो गया तो उनकी ड्यूटी लगनी है. मतलब वहाँ पे शेयरिंग नहीं हो रही है. वहाँ पे शेयरिंग जो होती है वो कम होती है. तो वो ये इनकी अपनी प्रॉब्लम है. अर्बन हाउसहोल्ड्स में क्या है कि जर्नी टू इंडिपेंडेंस इज अ लॉट मोर सेल्फ ड्रिवन. इट रिक्वायर्स a lot more initiative from her part. Now, urban again, if you see the poor women, they are forced to be independent because a lot of urban men have vulnerable jobs. They have, they sometimes have drinking problems or they
So
are
you
not
need someone
really
to
useful.
support the
So
income
somebody
of the
has to
family.
support. So they end up finding the job opportunities
Correct.
and they end up supporting. So
Correct.
उनकी तो अलग है independence की journey. They do become members of these, क्या बोलते हैं उसको, कमिटी.
Yes.
हमारे यहाँ
Yes.
बॉम्बे में कमेटी बोलते हैं. तो वो फिर कोई कमेटी डाल लेती हैं, फिर उसमें वो पैसे बचाती हैं. तो उनका वो लाइफ है. जो वेल्दियर सेगमेंट ऑफ सोसाइटी है, अकॉर्डिंग टू मी दे आर द मोस्ट कॉम्प्लिकेटेड बिकॉज उनके हाथ में सब कुछ है पर उनके हाथ में कुछ भी नहीं है. क्योंकि इनहेरिटेंस लॉज आर still very complicated. The good news is that a lot more women are inheriting because single child policy, two child policy. So a lot of people of our generation only have daughters. तो वो क्या करेंगे? And there has been a affluence journey of Indians also. Middle class and upper class Indians have become more affluent. So they have things to give. अब हमारे पापा मम्मी हमें किसी छोटे शहर में एक घर देते तो हमारे लिए उसकी मतलब नहीं थी. पर अब हम तो अपने बच्चों को बॉम्बे, दिल्ली जैसे शहरों में घर देंगे. Property prices have gone up. So girls are inheriting a bunch of these type of assets. So they have to do something with it. They're inheriting gold, sometimes foreign accounts. So they have to learn. They don't have a choice, but they have to learn. Because one of my friends, his wife actually in Silicon Valley, inherited a whole bunch of money and shares from her father. So the father passed away and there were three sisters. So all the three sisters got a lot of, stocks and bank accounts and everything. Now, she doesn't have a choice but to understand कि उसका क्या
Yes.
करना है. So एक तो inheritance से चीज़ें change हो रही हैं. दूसरी change हो रही हैं out of this desire to be independent just for no other reason कि हाँ मुझे कुछ करना है. So you'll find a lot of women doing something on the side. So they have these beautiful homes. They are always there to host parties, but they also have a tailor sitting somewhere who's making these fancy clothes which are very high margin products.
Yes.
So you also find a lot
So
more women
change is
doing
happening across rural
Yes.
and urban.
Yes.
And since the theme is accelerating action, Shinjini Ji, let's come to the point of what should be the roadmap ahead. Because the whole idea is what are the actions that we should be taking as a community to build more independence amongst women, whether it's in urban and rural. जैसे आपने बात की, the idea of mobility, right? And आपने कहा कि sometimes it's forced upon them because they are the only bread earner or they're the income earner or they're the ones holding the money, so they have to learn how to manage it. If we talk about rural and the need for what positive and affirmative actions we need to take in rural, आपने self-help groups की बात की, that they are able to get access to cash because of the self-help groups and all that. You've been a fintech, you are a fintech entrepreneur, you worked in the space of banking, all kinds of banking and all of that. Tell us in terms of what are the actions you think we need to take? How does the ecosystem come together to drive financial independence? And I'm calling out financial because just to make sure that the point that we said earlier, that money is important.
Yeah.
And either she's forced into managing money or she needs to understand and therefore push herself to want to own and manage money. What should we be doing? And what are some of the actions which can go across urban and rural? And perhaps what are some of the actions which are kind of concentrated towards rural? Because, for example, self-help groups, it's a very rural phenomena. And the question is, RBI has been talking about digitization of self-help groups and, being able to give them access to loans. Even microfinance as an industry is moving from group lending to individual lending at some level, kind of a thing. Getting money and then using the money, and then what more tools can be given. So just drawing from the work you're doing right now to the work that you've done over the last 30 years, what's the road ahead? Karna kya hai?
Okay, so let me give you some dramatic answers to that.
I love drama.
And that's the only way we have to think, because this incrementalism now over the years
Yes.
is like,
We have to
हाँ
think
ठीक है,
disruption.
हाँ, so थोड़ा तो करना पड़ेगा,
हाँ
ठीक है. अब वो होगा कैसे, वो हम बाद में करेंगे. So first thing first, I think as a community, as a society, we need to realize that by putting a cap on the family income to the income that the man can earn, households are losing out on wealth creation. I'll explain this. So a girl and a boy get married. They're most likely both same level of education. Across India now that is happening because a lot of more girls,
Yes.
लड़की पढ़ाओ, लड़की
Yeah.
बचाओ, सब
Yes,
हो गया.
yes, yes.
So हमने सबको बराबर बराबर, तो वो भी +2 से आती है, तो उनकी शादी भी वैसे होती है. Most places is like that. After that, what happens is that the girl has to walk one step behind. Now, ऐसी कोई genetic law तो है नहीं कि the girl will always be inferior to the man. वो matching तो हम करते नहीं हैं, वो कुंडली में लिखा हुआ नहीं आता है. So as a result, many times the boy will genuinely be smarter at earning money, and therefore he will have greater opportunity to earn money, and the girl will have lesser opportunity to earn money. Perfect, no problem. But many times the girl will have greater opportunity to earn money, but she will consciously cap herself. वो marathon runner है, पर वो एक्चुअली वो वॉकर के पीछे पीछे धीरे धीरे चल रही है, क्योंकि वो शी कैनॉट एक्सीड दैट, शी कैनॉट मेक मोर मनी. दैट इज एक्चुअली समथिंग दैट इज at a societal level. We have to start accepting women earning more money than the man of the house has to become normalized. That is still, I mean, it's not that it doesn't happen, but it is still something that we have to start understanding the importance of it. Accept तो आपको करना ही पड़ेगा. मेरा घर ऐसा है, मेरे बहुत सारे दोस्त ऐसे हैं, तो आपके पास acceptance के सिवा कोई रास्ता नहीं है. You know what will change? What is changing this? What is changing this is not women. What is changing this is men. A lot more men of the young generation don't come with this baggage that
Yes.
they have to be older than their girlfriends, and they have to make more money than their girlfriends. They're not following
They're
these
very
norms.
confident that if their partner is making more money, that's a good thing. In fact, they talk about it as well.
Yeah. Or even in rural India, you will find a lot more younger men willing to marry. ये अलग बात है कि वहाँ तो अभी भी उसके लिए लड़की भी कमाने वाली है, फिर भी दहेज दिया जा रहा है, वो सब अलग social ills की problem है. But once they get married, you'll find a lot more of these younger men much more willing to collaborate with their woman in whatever she's doing, etc. So you will find a lot more men willing to leave their jobs or their business to join the business of the woman if her business seems to be doing well. तो वो जो एक practical reality है, वो हम सबको, we need to be more aware and alive to it, and we need to it needs to happen more and more and
Correct.
more and more by a very dramatic number. Now the question is, what will drive that, right? How will we drive that situation that whoever is the best, whoever is the marathon runner in that family? If you look at this country, it's an aggregation of households, right? In each household, there's a certain pool of talent and there's a certain pool of capital, right? The capital is mostly all available to the man, and therefore the capital gets capped to the talent also of the man. But how can we understand that as a household, if there is more talent than that, then let that talent also be used in wealth creation? So that's one story that we have to follow. The second thing that I think is dramatic and needs to work is ये सारे जो politicians हमारे हैं, जो बहुत अच्छे intention से हर election में announce करते हैं कि हम आपको 3,000 औरतों को देंगे चूड़ी खरीदने के लिए और बिंदी खरीदने के लिए और मंगलसूत्र खरीदने के लिए और मिक्सी खरीदने के लिए और गैस का चूल्हा जलाने के लिए. भाई साहब, ऐसा है, खाना आदमी भी खाते हैं, तो वो जो खाना बना रही है ना, आप औरतों को कुछ नहीं कर रहे हैं गैस का चूल्हा दे के, आप हाउसहोल्ड्स को गैस का चूल्हा दे रहे हैं. So this narrative, there is a very defeatist and a very backward narrative to say that हमने उज्ज्वला स्कीम बनाई और हमने औरतों को गैस का चूल्हा दिया. आपने हाउसहोल्ड्स को गैस का चूल्हा दिया. अब उस हाउसहोल्ड की प्रोडक्टिविटी को आप कैसे इंक्रीज कर सकते हैं उस गैस के चूल्हे से, आप वो सोचिए. आप ये मत सोचिए कि उस औरत की आंख से आंसू निकल रहे थे, वो चूल्हे में खाना बना रही थी, हमने उसको गैस का चूल्हा दे दिया तो हमने वेलफेयर किया है. आपने वेलफेयर नहीं किया है, आपने एक अच्छा इकोनॉमिक डिसीजन लिया है. नाउ मेक द मोस्ट ऑफ इट. नाउ आई विल टेल यू व्हाट दे शुड बी डू, व्हाट आई थिंक शुड बी मोर हेल्पफुल. इंस्टेड ऑफ गिविंग बिंदी और चूड़ी खरीदने के पैसे, आप उनको इंश्योरेंस दे दो ना. लॉ ऑफ लार्ज नंबर्स, आप सबको दे दो इंश्योरेंस, हेल्थ इंश्योरेंस दे दो. आधे लोगों को समझ नहीं आएगा, यूज नहीं, अब तो कर रहे हैं ना, लाइक व्हाट दे आर डूइंग विद इंश्योरेंस. Those are the type of things that will help. So many women, just now I was telling you the story of somebody I met. The vulnerability that women stare at the moment the man goes out of their life, whether by way of a divorce or by way of a death or by way of not marrying and not inheriting anything, is also quite a significant phenomenon. So give them the ability to, let's say, if they're participating in the markets, give them a safe product which is also not so tax inefficient. Like, I mean, I don't want to get into the debate of it, but today it is almost impossible for a person to build an income stream without taking equity risk. Now, a lot of women who have to run their households on small budgets don't want to take that equity risk. Products are not available. Similarly, lending, तो हम सबको पता है कि lending में क्या problem है. Accessing either capital either as equity or as debt for women-owned enterprises continues to be a very major challenge, right?
Why is that? Why is that a challenge? How does it matter if a woman is running it or a man is running it?
First of all, it is not, I think we were also talking about it. First of all, it is so hard to determine who is running it.
Yes.
So by default, the man is running it.
Yes.
By default, आपने वो formal जूते पहने हैं और मैंने ये वाली जूते पहन लिए.
वो तो उन्होंने पढ़वाए थे.
तो by default आप serious आदमी हैं जो business कर रहे हैं और मैं तो बस party कर रही हूँ. You know, we have this narrative is so strong that अगर आप किसी घर में चले जाएं तो by default वो आदमी जो है ना वो आपको 3 बार बोलेगा कि नहीं नहीं ये इनका business है मैं कुछ नहीं करता हूँ इसमें ये इन्हीं का काम है.
Correct.
हाँ, और by default वो औरत एक बार भी नहीं बोलेगी कि नहीं ये मेरा काम है मैं ही कर रही हूँ ये कुछ नहीं करते हैं क्योंकि ये इतनी ingrained hai. The idea that you'll walk into a household and you will assume that if there is a business, see, this doesn't happen in jobs. So job creation, if we were an economy that were creating jobs by the droves and every woman, all she had to do after doing her graduation
was
or whatever
take a job.
Was to get a visiting card to say this corporation and I have this job, then we would have a different battle to fight that, you know, maternity leave, children, crashes, and a different battle to fight. That fight would be a standardized fight for everybody. But that's not the case with our economy. We are a very primarily entrepreneurial economy. चाहे पकोड़ा बेच रहे हो आप, चाहे आप export कर रहे हो.
The MSME.
So we are a MSME economy at the smaller end actually, not even at the larger end, right? So two problems continue to remain. How do you bridge that, unless you bridge that capital gap, moving from that small to the medium is impossible.
Yes.
अपने पैसे से तो होगा नहीं वो.
Yes.
तो और वो bridge तो टूटा हुआ है. उस ब्रिज पे ना कैपिटल का ब्रिज भी टूटा हुआ है और डेट का भी ब्रिज टूटा हुआ है. चूंकि कैपिटल का इक्विटी का ब्रिज टूटा हुआ है तो डेट का ब्रिज तो कभी बनेगा ही नहीं, है ना, क्योंकि डेट का ब्रिज तो इक्विटी के ऊपर बना हुआ है. तो जब डेट का ही ब्रिज पिलर्स ही हैं, इक्विटी तो पिलर है, डेट तो ब्रिज है, तो पिलर ही नहीं है तो ब्रिज भी नहीं है. सो व्हाट वी विल हैव टू स्टार्ट थिंकिंग एंड ऑल द पॉलिसीज दैट कम, they come, you know, too little, too late, a lot of times. So I used to always say this about priority sector lending, कि अगर priority sector lending had done its job, तो the economy would reflect it, ना?
Yes.
You know, 40% अगर वहाँ जा रहा होता, तो वो तो अभी तक कितने हमें medium और large enterprises बन गए होते उस पैसे से.
Correct.
पर वो तो नहीं हुआ. So we have to be much more, you know, we have to do a lot more work in that space, is what I'm saying.
Yeah. So
why do women not get it? Is first of all, visibility is a big problem. The assumption is that the man is doing the job and the woman is not. So I call it the type 1 and type 2 problem. Type 1 problem is over-inclusion, that, you know, a lot more women's names are on the ROC registers as founders and directors of companies, but they're just moms and bhabis and sisters whose names were given. Or sometimes subsidy chahiye, iske liye naam dal diya ya aise kuch karte hain. So that is over-inclusion ka problem. The under-inclusion is an equally big problem, that you will walk into these, and that you can only know this by going there. So that's why I traveled so much, because I started to meet these women and I started to understand कि इनका actual role क्या है. So you will find कि all family-owned enterprises need trusted human capital, right? Once you've solved the capital problem, because the man has the capital. Now what does the woman have? The woman does end up having talent, and she's a trustworthy person to have by your side. So a lot of these businesses get built with the joint labor of the woman, and the woman actually does, she's the CEO, she has many roles, but she doesn't have a visiting card. She doesn't have a card, she doesn't have a salary. So what ends up happening is that she's still powerful. You will find that they exercise their autonomy. So it's not that all men are sitting there to oppress all women, because that's not how it works. So, and it's not even that they do it overtly or covertly. It's just that it's a matter of life. आप अपनी जिंदगी daily जीते हैं तो आप ideology पे नहीं जीते हैं ना, आप तो अपनी जिंदगी daily relationships और पैसा और society उसके ऊपर जीते हैं. So they have their standing in society, they are doing their work. But I think what we have to start doing, and when we think we want to recognize them, then we end up giving them trophies and whatever, make them stand on stage, and all that is like doesn't help. It doesn't help because it caps your visibility to very small things. कि मतलब हाँ भैया आप औरत हैं, आप घर से निकल के आपने एक दुकान खोल ली, अब ये रहा है, आपको एक अवार्ड दे देते हैं. आदमियों को तो कोई नहीं अवार्ड देता है घर से बाहर निकल के दुकान खोलने के लिए. So I think we have to start applying very sharp filters to these things. But अगर आप काम कर रहे हैं तो आप, how do I recognize you? How do I know that you are the woman who is actually doing the work? Like you also have that problem in your network, right? You are saying that you have 10,000 or whatever number of
Yes.
registered women, but you think that only a certain number of them is doing the work, the rest of it is being done by the men. Now, how will you know this? Now, one thing that I advocate very strongly is, I think mobility, again. In your space, for example, it's very easy to see. If you were able to give all these women scooties to drive,
Yes.
and if you were able to see that they were actually physically moving about, because in this day and age, it's very easy to find that kind of data, you would very easily be able to understand if she was a type 1 or a type 2
Yes. Yes.
person for you, right?
Oh.
Similarly, I found when I traveled and I saw these women, it wasn't very hard to actually realize who was a decision maker versus who was a family, big
Yeah.
family, rich woman by asking just a few questions. So we can actually do that. It's hard work. It's not, I'm not saying it's easy, but that bridge, building that bridge of capital and visibility and is important, because then that pushes a lot more households to try that. The other thing that's really happening in Middle India is a lot of these businesses end up getting, after the hard work of building the business, they end up getting shut down. They end up getting shut down because the children go outside and they don't come back. So because
तो चलाएगा कौन?
तो चलाएगा कौन? Or these businesses are not of that size and scale where professional management can run it. And this I have seen in all types of businesses. Like I met this wonderful woman in UP who's built this big infrastructure of educational institutions. But she says, I cannot find a successor, because educational institutions are built on a certain type of ideology, a certain type of commitment, and then finding successors is very, very hard. So I think to answer your question, the mobility of women is a very important answer to many of these challenges. So like she can't find a successor because in her ecosystem there are no women. But maybe there's a woman in Tamil Nadu who can do that job very well. But for a woman to move from Tamil Nadu to Lucknow to run that is almost impossible today. ये tier 2 के बीच में mobility बहुत कम है. Everybody migrates to the Delhi, Mumbai, Calcutta, Chennai, Bangalore thing. But between these cities, so the talent movement of women is also very restricted. So I think a few of these things we can
amazing.
work.
So just to close on our
sorry.
conversation, this has been totally fascinating. I just want to pick on this theme that you mentioned, that we are an entrepreneurial economy. The MSME is the backbone of our economy. And when you think about financial independence, it's about credit to MSME. It's about how to enable them to do more. And again, just listening to you, Shinjini Ji, मुझे जो लग रहा है कि maybe it's not just about the woman in the house. Maybe it's about the whole house itself.
Yeah,
Because-
always the household.
Because if we go back to the household as the unit,
Yeah.
and we are saying वो सब मिल के, आपने कहा हम स्पाइस मनी में एक बहुत इंटरेस्टिंग नरेटिव यूज करते हैं when we work in 250,000 villages with rural households, कि if you think of the man of the house, and I'm not wanting to sound patriarchal here, as the CEO of the house, the woman is the CFO, and maybe the kid is the CTO, who's on the smartphone using technology. Because we realize as we are driving digital financial services, the young girl and the young boy in the house are more digitally native. And they are teaching the mother and the father how to also use the computer and use the phone and all that stuff. So they're adding this additional source of income. So effectively what's happening is it's becoming like a household collaborating to succeed. और आपने बात की about foundation, कि भाई अगर मुझे debt देना है तो पहले equity चाहिए, अगर equity चाहिए तो savings चाहिए, तो कहीं ना कहीं से there has to be a foundation on which it has to be built. So really, is that the big opportunity to unlock? Because if we are an entrepreneurial economy, then by definition, people are doing something. Can that something be grown?
Yeah.
In a manner where we have the financial community, whether it's banks, fintechs, regulator, all the different stakeholders coming together to say, how do we work with this MSME economy कि वो जो भी कुछ कर रहे हैं उसको और कैसे टेक्नोलॉजी को यूज करके whatever savings they have, how do we convert that into equity, which can then be leveraged for debt, and all of that can lead to growth in income. जैसे आपने कहा priority sector lending अगर हो रही है, it should finally turn to growth in income.
Yeah.
So the question becomes a positive, self-reinforcing cycle. Is that the big unlock when we talk about accelerating action? That can we accelerate action for a household in rural India to be able to do more in whatever they do as a business, whether it's livestock, agri, dukan, a small, silai ki dukan? Is that the starting point? And then leave it to the family to say how they organize themselves, given the
Yeah.
family structure,
Yeah.
in terms of allocation of work. But is it about picking up that household and saying, "Aur aap ye kaam kar rahe hain, how can we as an ecosystem help you to build that foundation where you start saving, you start building equity base, and we help you to leverage it, and you can then grow income?" And so effectively, how do we become a more empathetic, value-adding ecosystem which helps every rural household to grow income?
Sure. And why just rural? Include everyone.
Yes.
And I'll give you two more things to that. One is that when you talk about the man being the CEO and the woman being the CFO and the child being the CTO, I think we also have to start understanding that it may very well be whoever is the best suited to be the CEO or CFO.
I think that point you
many
checked on
times-
beautifully, right? Because you
Yeah.
said marathon jo bhag rahe hain,
Yeah.
maybe they can, that's
Don't
why I
catch
said
them.
leave it to them to decide the roles.
Yes. And the reason that happens is because of lack of access, lack of mobility.
Yes.
So if you can solve some of those vectors, that the woman has
Yeah,
equal
let the
mobility.
woman take a lead.
Yes.
If she has the mobility, she
Yes.
can be the lead.
Yes.
And then
If she's the better communicator,
Yes.
she can go and present her case better to the investor, better to the district collector. So then she should be the CEO. And then the man may be the CFO.
MFIs में आप
So-
देखेंगे सारी group meetings में women ही जा रही हैं.
Exactly.
So actually they are the CEO for the
Yes.
MFI household.
Yes. So we have to kind of
Swap those roles,
encourage
taper
that,
them.
depending on who's the best
Who's the
suited for
best
that.
suited for it.
So that's
Perfect.
one thing that we have to do.
Perfect.
The second thing, which is similar, is in your building that ecosystem and that bridge, is that lot more women and also men actually in the relatively not so wealthy households end up choosing businesses that are low entry barrier businesses because of the low capital requirement. हाँ, अच्छा चलो हम टेलर बन जाते हैं, अच्छा चलो हम जो हमारा access है
Is
उसी
it a
के बीच
skill
में हम
issue
कुछ
or
करते
an
हैं.
access to capital issue or an access to idea?
I personally think, so I have a story on skill, which was told to me by a very dear professor of mine when I was a student. So John Kenneth Galbraith. So my professor was the son of John Kenneth Galbraith.
Okay.
And this was the story of John Kenneth Galbraith, who, as you know, had a legendary sense of humor. So John Kenneth Galbraith went to post-war Reconstruction Europe. And there was a lot of people working on a shipyard. And so he asked the owner that how do you recruit these people? Because where do you get the talent suddenly to reconstruct all of Europe? And so this guy said that we blow in one ear, and if the air doesn't come out of the other ear, we hire them. Okay? It's a very instructional story. So if there is something inside the brain, that person will learn the job if you give him the job.
Yes.
In most cases, skill is that, okay? None of us come trained, from our school trained to be. I mean,
So you're saying they end up starting businesses with low entry barriers?
yes, because of the constraints that are on them of capital and सराउंडिंग इकोसिस्टम. ठीक है, तो क्या होता है कि अब सब लोग बाल काटने बैठ जाते हैं. आप कलकत्ता जैसी जगह पे, यू नो द अंडर डेवलपमेंट ऑफ अ सिटी बाय सीइंग द नंबर ऑफ कंसंट्रेशन ऑफ ब्यूटी पार्लर इन दैट सिटी. मैं किसी शहर में जाती हूँ तो गूगल पे देखती हूँ पार्लर्स नियर मी. जितने पार्लर्स दिखते हैं मुझे पता चल जाता है कि मतलब या तो यहाँ पे लोगों के पास बहुत पैसा है कि बहुत जैसे
So you're saying it leads to oversupply and therefore poor
it
income?
leads to and a lot more mortality of businesses, right?
So how do we solve for that?
Because how we solve for this? In the same ecosystem, you will find there are a lot of real problems to be solved, right? There are a lot of real problems to be solved everywhere. Why is it that people are not solving those problems? Because
सब
those
सिलाई की
problems...
दुकान क्यों लगा रहे हैं या सब बार्बर शॉप क्यों बना रहे हैं?
Exactly. वो कोई और बड़ी प्रॉब्लम क्यों नहीं सॉल्व कर रहे हैं या छोटी भी प्रॉब्लम ऐसी प्रॉब्लम क्यों नहीं सॉल्व कर रहे हैं जिसको कि आप मोनेटाइज कर, क्योंकि बार्बर शॉप में आपको पहले दिन से बाल काटने के 50 रुपए मिलते हैं. लेकिन अगर आप कोई ऐसी बड़ी प्रॉब्लम सॉल्व कर रहे हैं जिसकी नीड लोगों को अभी पता ही नहीं है पर पता चल जाएगी और तब आपको पैसे मिलने शुरू हो जाएंगे, तो आपको 3 साल का जेस्टेशन पीरियड होगा ना. वो 3 साल का
You're talking like a venture capital model.
But that is the truth.
You're talking about
venture
basically what you
capital.
need is micro venture
Yes,
financing.
Of course you need that. How will you fix the pillars of capital?
So is that something that we should think of as part of an action plan?
I will tell you, because staying in my village these few months has been very instructional. So I went to this nursery to buy a plant. And that guy told me that he was the 23rd biggest horticulturist in the country. He had one small house and one small nursery, and because they have some horticulture. So I learned a lot about how that system operates. My village is very close to Pusa, which used to be the original agricultural institute, and so there it's a it does have some legacy to that. A lot of businesses, good businesses, are built with a combination of legacy. So legacy को तो हमने ऐसे ही गड्ढे में डाल दिया because everybody decided that I don't want to do the job that my father or my grandfather did. So आप if you are a shopkeeper's son, you don't want to be a shopkeeper. If you're a shoemaker's son, you don't want to be a shoemaker because of various social things. And I'm not saying the right or wrong, but I'm saying how do you acquire that skill or that talent is. So first, look for the talent. Second, look for the real problem. There are lots of problems. I'll tell you, in the rural ecosystem, since you work with so many women, the problem to be solved is that these self-help group women had a very different set of problems. Their daughters and their daughters-in-law have a very different set of problems.
Yes.
But we still have the same solution. The solution is now looking for a problem which does not exist. The problem that now exists for these girls is how do they get, because they've all done their class 12, their mothers were illiterate, they've done class 12, many of them are going to college. When they get married, even if they're doing some work here, they don't start any work in their rural household, in their maiden household, because shaadi ho jayegi to chali jayegi. When they go to the new place, they take 2-3 years to build their build their confidence, build their network, तब तक फिर बच्चा हो जाता है. तो वो 6-7 साल का तो एक dark period होता है उसके लिए. उसके बाद if she wants to emerge out of that and do something, how do you retrieve that person and give that person something to do? And that again requires that level of, and I don't call it skill, because when we say skill, तो हम कहते हैं अगरबत्ती बनाने के लिए सिखा दो. तो अगरबत्ती बनाना सीखने से कोई अगरबत्ती नहीं बनाता है. जिसको अगरबत्ती बनाना है ना, वो कोई अगरबत्ती बनाने वाला लेके आ जाएगा और बहुत अगरबत्तियां बना लेगा. So somewhere this idea that micro enterprises also need to grow into major enterprises is not going to happen simply because you will put priority sector debt into them and these people will come and borrow from you and वो 50,000 अगरबत्ती से बढ़ा के 5 लाख अरे 5 लाख अगरबत्ती की डिमांड भी होनी चाहिए, उसके ब्रांडिंग होनी
one
चाहिए.
big takeaway
Yeah.
from our conversation, Shinjini Ji, just in closing, could it be that can the ecosystem work together to create a micro venture financing system where ideas around what are the problems, looking out for solutions, so that households who are doing businesses, next generation does not want to do that business, or they want to do something, looking for an idea, just rather than just follow and create oversupply and therefore not a viable business. Is there an opportunity where, like in a VC industry, we say, okay, every startup is chasing a problem.
Yeah.
In the micro venture space, the micro as MSME space, is there a need for the ecosystem to come out and kind of publish out, right? That there are so many problems in different parts of India. And we talk about strengths of different parts of India, to give ideas to households and then support them with financial products. To then create a situation where people can start businesses or stop and start a new business, and they can start doing it in areas which will help them grow income in a sustainable way. So is that something that we can go back and work together as an ecosystem? And I don't know, salt, for example, and we've not spoken about that. Maybe we need a separate Chaupal for that. But is that the point, right? We are an entrepreneurial economy, micro MSMEs, big in our economy, households come together and collaborate. The CEO, CFO roles between the man and the woman in the house is swappable based on who's more capable, who's more mobile. So is it about enabling them with the right problem to go after and then the right solution, so that the savings converting into equity, converting into debt, converting into growth and income can be a sustainable ladder that we can build for every household in India?
Sure. I mean, sounds great. I mean, with the diversity that we have in this country, nothing is easy. But the great thing is that a lot of, at the micro level, at the level at which you are speaking, because your interest is a lot more in rural and micro, states are much more in charge of the destiny of their state than a centralized model. So I think working with states to create something in that space could be a very meaningful exercise.
Shinjini Ji, thank you so much. I think we could just go on. I'm just loving this. You are so full of wisdom and experience, and knowledge that I think we need multiple Chaupals with you, and we need to keep figuring out ways to do that. But thank you so much for taking our time. I think, given your experience, first of all, a lot of good wishes to Salt.
Thank you.
I hope that enterprise goes from
I need
strength.
a lot of them.
That goes from strength to strength. I mentioned to you, I said, is it Gandhiji's salt revolution that you're trying to create at your end? And it's phenomenal that you're thinking disruptive and transformative. All the best for the book. That's coming up. I think today's conversation to me has been a great celebration of the journey of India and the opportunity that India has, looking ahead. I think, given leaders like yourselves, I'm sure that there's a lot we're going to see happen in the space that you're in, and with your networks, you will see many other people coming together to drive the change that we want to see happen. Thank you so much for joining us at the Spicemoney Chaupal. I'm sure we'll stay connected, but thank you. And as we celebrate International Women's Day, I think there's a great opportunity now to get inspired by leaders like Shinjini Ji, who've truly demonstrated that in her journey from being a regulator to a banker to a fintech entrepreneur and now an author, there is so much that an individual, when they decide to do, they can make happen. And today, with 140 crore citizens of our country, I think there's great opportunity. And I would like to conclude by saying that we do need more Shinjini Jis out there, driving change and making change happen. So on this International Women's Day, with the theme of accelerating action, I'm so glad that we got the opportunity to talk to a change maker, someone who believes in action, and learn from her as to how you can lead by example. Thank you so much to everyone for joining us at this Spicemoney Chaupal, and we look forward to seeing you at the next episode. Thank you. Namaskar.